10-year-old girl discovers how to travel for free and shocks airline. Jennifer Davis stared in disbelief at the computer screen as executives from Sky America rushed back and forth in the emergency meeting room. No cybersecurity expert could explain how a child had found that flaw in the system, allowing tickets to be issued without any charge. Just then, the door opened and Sarah Miller walked in with little Emily, a 10-year-old girl with blonde hair, expressive blue eyes, and a calm expression that contrasted with the chaos in the corporate room. Everyone fell silent immediately. A child had achieved what professional hackers had tried for years, uncovering a critical vulnerability in the largest airline in the United States. "Emily, sweetheart, these gentlemen want to talk to you about what you did on Daddy's computer," said Sarah, gently squeezing her daughter's shoulder. The girl looked at everyone without fear, only genuine curiosity. Her small hands firmly held a blue folder with some papers inside. "I just wanted to see my grandma," Emily replied clearly. "You'd do the same if she was sick and lived so far away." Michael Thompson, the airline's head of digital security, stood up with a stern face, but Jennifer, the customer relations director, subtly signaled for him to stay calm. "Emily, do you understand that what you did is, well, not allowed?" Jennifer asked, keeping her tone gentle. "I know, but Daddy lost his job when the lab closed. Grandma Margaret has that heart condition, and no one could afford to take me to Chicago," Emily answered, opening the folder and pulling out some hand-drawn sketches. "Look, I drew how your system works. There's an open door here when you updated it in March." The technicians exchanged surprised glances as they saw rudimentary but flawlessly logical diagrams pinpointing the exact system flaw. Jennifer felt a chill. This girl wasn't just smart, she was a prodigy. "How did you figure this out, Emily?" asked Ryan Wilson, the team's most experienced programmer. "I watch everything," she replied simply. "Daddy always bought tickets on the website before he lost his job. I sat beside him and memorized how it worked. Then, when I needed to see Grandma, I tried doing the same, but the payment kept failing. So I started changing numbers in the website address until one day it worked." The room stayed silent for a few seconds. A 10-year-old had found a vulnerability through trial and error, something people with years of experience had missed. "Are you going to arrest my dad?" Emily suddenly asked, her voice trembling for the first time. "Please don't. He didn't know anything. I took his computer when he was asleep." Sarah hugged her daughter protectively, her teary eyes reflecting the fear she'd felt since discovering what Emily had done. "No one is arresting anyone," Jennifer said firmly, standing and walking toward the girl. "But we do need to talk with your parents and understand this situation better." In the waiting area of Sky America's headquarters, Daniel Miller sat anxiously, his face marked by deep circles under his eyes. When the door opened and he saw his wife and daughter walking out with serious-looking executives, his heart raced. "Daniel Miller," Jennifer called, extending her hand. "I'm Jennifer Davis, Director of Customer Relations. Can we speak privately?" The man nodded, his trembling hands betraying his nerves. As they were led to a smaller room, Daniel whispered to his wife, "What did she do, Sarah? What did our daughter do?" 3 weeks later, in the vast hall of JFK International Airport, Emily watched in fascination as passengers bustled about. Dressed in her best blue dress, she held her father's hand tightly as they waited for boarding time. "Daddy, look, there's the lady who talked to us that day." Emily discreetly pointed to Jennifer, who approached with a warm smile. "Ready for the big trip?" asked the executive, accompanied by a young man carrying a small box wrapped in colorful paper. "I still can't believe it," Daniel replied, his voice thick with emotion. "What's happened these past few weeks feels like a dream." Harold, Margaret's husband, joined the small group. He had traveled to New York to accompany the family to Chicago, where Emily would finally see her grandmother. "Thank you for everything you've done for my family," the elderly man said, shaking Jennifer's hand firmly. Margaret hasn't stopped talking about seeing her granddaughter again. Jennifer smiled and crouched to Emily's eye level. "This is for you," she said, handing the package to the girl. "It's a special gift from the team." Emily carefully unwrapped it and found a brand new tablet inside. "There's a special program installed on it," Jennifer explained. An educational software so you can learn real programming, not just finding flaws, she added with a wink. The girl hugged the gift with genuine excitement. Just then, the loudspeaker announced the boarding of the flight to Chicago. "That's our flight," Sarah said, adjusting the small backpack on her shoulders. "Thank you so much for everything, Jennifer." "Don't thank us," the executive replied. "Emily helped us identify a critical flaw in the system. She may have prevented much bigger problems in the future." As the family headed toward the boarding gate, Jennifer watched little Emily walking with determined steps, the tablet held tightly to her chest. "That girl has a bright future," Ryan commented as he quietly approached. "No doubt," Jennifer agreed. "That's why I pushed so hard for the board to approve the technology scholarship program. Emily will be our first recipient." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. On the flight to Chicago, Emily sat by the window, with her parents in the seats beside her. Flight attendants Ashley and Chief Stewardess Madison frequently passed by to check on them, always exchanging curious glances with the girl. They knew who Emily was. The story had spread like wildfire within the company. "Everything all right, miss?" Ashley asked, leaning slightly toward Emily as she offered an orange juice. "I'm fine, thank you," Emily replied politely, accepting the juice. Her sharp eyes took in every detail of the aircraft, as if she were mentally disassembling and reassembling complex systems. In the seat beside her, Daniel held Sarah's hand tightly. The couple was still trying to process everything that had happened in the past few weeks. In an instant, their lives had been completely transformed. "I still can't believe that instead of suing our daughter, they offered you a job," Sarah whispered to her husband, making sure Emily was distracted by her new tablet. Daniel shook his head, equally amazed. "System security consultant," he quoted. "Who would have thought my experience with pharmaceutical labs would be useful for an airline?" "Jennifer said they needed fresh perspectives on the system," Sarah replied. "People who aren't conditioned to think like traditional programmers." The plane hit a mild patch of turbulence when Emily turned her attention from the window to her parents. "You're not mad at me anymore?" she asked suddenly, her big blue eyes fixed on their faces. Sarah and Daniel exchanged glances. The days following the discovery of what their daughter had done had been intense. The initial worry about possible legal consequences, the anger over the risk she took, the fear for the future, all of it had dominated the Miller household. But now something different hung in the air. "We're not angry, sweetheart," said Daniel, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "We're worried about what could have happened. What you did was wrong, even if your intentions were good." "But we understand why you did it," Sarah added. "You really wanted to see your grandmother and you found a way. We just need you to understand that there are rules and limits that have to be respected." Emily nodded solemnly, showing a maturity beyond her years. "Mrs. Jennifer explained to me about ethics in technology," she said, surprising her parents with the technical term. "She said people with special skills need to use them for good, not to cheat systems." Daniel smiled, proud despite everything. And she's absolutely right. As the plane began its descent into Chicago, Emily pressed her face against the oval window, watching the vast green expanse of the Great Lakes forest surrounding the city. Somewhere down there was her grandmother Margaret, waiting to finally hold her after so much time apart. In Terminal 1 of O'Hare International Airport, Margaret Roberts sat in a wheelchair, her portable oxygen beside her, and her wrinkled hands fidgeting in her lap. Though the doctor had recommended complete rest, nothing could stop her from coming to the airport to greet her family, especially her beloved granddaughter. "Mrs. Margaret, don't you think we should move closer to the arrivals gate?" suggested Deborah, the nurse accompanying the elderly woman. "No, dear. From here I can see when they come," Margaret replied, her tired but watchful eyes fixed on the gate where passengers would soon emerge. When the electronic display showed that the flight from New York had landed, Margaret felt her heart race with excitement. Her husband Harold had called before boarding, telling her about the unbelievable turn in Emily's story. The old woman could hardly believe that her granddaughter, still so young, had moved mountains just to see her. Passengers began streaming through the arrivals gate. Margaret leaned forward in her chair, searching the crowd for familiar faces. And then, like the vision she'd been waiting for, she saw her. Emily ran ahead of her parents, her face lit up with a radiant smile. "Grandma!" the girl shouted, rushing toward her. Margaret opened her arms, tears streaming freely down her wrinkled cheeks. "My love, my little one!" she exclaimed, pulling her granddaughter into a tight hug, feeling the warmth of that small body against hers. Emily buried her face in her grandmother's shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of lavender she always associated with Margaret. For this moment, for this feeling, she would do it all over again, even knowing the risks and consequences. "I came, Grandma," Emily whispered. "I promised I would, and I did." Daniel and Sarah approached carrying their luggage, their faces tired but serene. Harold hugged his son and daughter-in-law as they watched the emotional reunion between grandmother and granddaughter. "How did you pull this off, son?" Harold asked quietly, still amazed by the turn of events. Daniel shook his head, looking at Emily, who was now excitedly showing her new tablet to her grandmother. "It wasn't me, Dad. It was her. Emily changed everything." In the luxurious apartment of Jennifer Davis, high up in a building on the Upper East Side, New York, the executive gazed at the illuminated city through the floor-to-ceiling window. In her hand, a glass of red wine contrasted with the official document she had just signed, the creation of the Wings of Tomorrow program, an educational initiative that would identify young talents in underserved communities to provide training in information technology. Her phone rang, displaying the name of Richard Keller, the CEO of Sky America. "Jennifer, I just saw the memo about the project. $50 million is a substantial investment," he said bluntly. "Are you sure this is the right time for it?" "Absolutely, Richard," she replied firmly. "The Emily case showed us we've been overlooking extraordinary talents due to pure social bias. Imagine how many Emilys there are across the United States, just waiting for an opportunity." There was a pause on the line before the CEO responded, "You really believe in that girl, don't you?" "It's not just about her," Jennifer explained, watching the city lights stretch to the horizon. "It's about recognizing that the future of our company and this country could be in the hands of a child who today doesn't even have access to a decent computer." "Very well," Richard conceded. "The board approved the project, especially after we explained how a 10-year-old girl managed to compromise our security. No one wants to go through that embarrassment again." After hanging up, Jennifer turned her gaze back to the city. Somewhere in Chicago, a little genius was likely hugging her grandmother, unaware she had sparked a corporate transformation that would affect thousands of lives. The suite at Mercy Medical Center in Chicago was decorated with colorful balloons and welcome signs. Margaret sat in a comfortable armchair by the window, while Emily showed her how to use the tablet. "Look, Grandma, just tap here and we can see each other, even when I go back to New York," the girl explained patiently, setting up the video call app. "This way, you won't feel alone anymore." The elderly woman smiled, amazed not just by the technology but mostly by her granddaughter's intelligence. "Emily, my angel, your mother told me what you did to come see me," Margaret said, holding the girl's small hands in hers. "It was very brave, but also very dangerous." Emily lowered her eyes, suddenly aware of the seriousness of what she had done. "I just wanted to see you, Grandma. The doctor said you were really sick." "And I was, sweetheart, I still am," Margaret admitted, stroking her granddaughter's face. "But do you know what made me feel so much better? Knowing you were coming. Sometimes hope is the best medicine we can have." Outside the room, Sarah Miller spoke with Dr. William Brooks, the cardiologist who had been treating Margaret for years. "Her condition is still concerning, but it's stabilized considerably in the last few weeks," the doctor explained, reviewing the chart. "The heart valve is responding well to medication, which gives us time to plan the surgery more safely." "And what are the chances of success?" Sarah asked, concern evident in her voice. The doctor adjusted his glasses, choosing his words carefully. "Mrs. Margaret is 78 and has some comorbidities that complicate things, but she's shown surprising resilience. Honestly, ever since she learned about her granddaughter's visit, her vitals have improved significantly." Sarah smiled, peering through the slightly open door at the tender scene between grandmother and granddaughter. "Emily always has that effect on people," she remarked. "Even when she causes trouble, she ends up bringing something good in the end." In the hospital reception area, Daniel was finalizing the details of the corporate health plan that would now cover his mother's treatments. It was one of the unexpected benefits of his new job at Sky America. "Mr. Miller?" called a woman's voice behind him. Daniel turned and saw an elegant woman, around 60 years old, wearing a hospital badge. "I'm Dr. Elizabeth Waters, the hospital director," she introduced herself. "Could I speak with you for a moment?" Intrigued, Daniel followed the doctor to a small meeting room nearby. Inside, to his surprise, were Dr. William Brooks and a man he didn't recognize, dressed in an impeccable suit. "This is Arthur Mitchell, a representative from the Science for All Foundation," explained Dr. Elizabeth. "He heard about your daughter's story and is particularly interested in meeting her." Daniel felt a mix of pride and apprehension. Emily's story had spread further than he'd imagined. "Mr. Miller, our foundation identifies young talents in science and technology," Arthur explained. "Your daughter's case came to us through Dr. Elizabeth, who serves on our advisory board. We were impressed by the logical reasoning and problem-solving skills Emily demonstrated," he continued. "We'd like to offer her a scholarship in our advanced development program." Daniel blinked a few times, trying to process the information. "A scholarship? But she's only 10. "Exactly why," Arthur smiled. "The earlier we identify and nurture these exceptional talents, the better the results." Back in Margaret's hospital room, Emily was now reading aloud passages from a book she had brought from New York specifically for her grandmother. It was a collection of poems by Maya Angelou, a writer Margaret often mentioned in her letters. "What matters in life is not where you start, but the journey." Emily read, her clear voice filling the room with the poet's words. Margaret listened with her eyes closed, an expression of peace on her wrinkled face. When the girl paused, the elderly woman finished the verse. "Keep walking and planting, and in the end you'll reap what you sow. That's always been my favorite part, you know." Emily smiled, fascinated by her grandmother's sharp memory. "Why do you love this poem so much, Grandma?" Margaret opened her eyes, looking affectionately at her granddaughter. "Because it reminds me that life isn't about where we begin, but the path we choose to take. You, my dear, are already planting extraordinary things, even at such a young age." The door to the room opened, and Daniel entered with Arthur Mitchell. His eyes sparkled in a way Emily knew well, the same glow that appeared when he had good news. "Emily, this gentleman wants to talk to you about something very special," Daniel announced, gesturing for Arthur to step forward. The girl closed the poetry book, curiosity written on her face. Another door was opening in her life, all because of a simple decision to be close to the ones she loved. In the administrative halls of Sky America in New York, Ryan Wilson was hunched over his computer, meticulously reviewing the security code for the reservation system. Beside him, a printout of the diagram Emily had made was pinned to the board, serving as a constant reminder of how an unconstrained mind could see what experts had missed. "Still working on that?" asked Timothy Anderson, the technology director, entering the room with 2 cups of coffee. "I want to be absolutely sure there are no other back doors," Ryan replied, accepting the coffee. If a 10-year-old found a flaw, imagine what professional hackers could do. Timothy nodded, pulling up a chair to sit beside his colleague. "Did you see Jennifer's proposal for the educational program?" "I did," Ryan confirmed. $50 million to train young talents. It seems that little girl made more of an impact than an entire team of expensive consultants we hired last year. Timothy smiled, taking a sip of his coffee. "You know what's most ironic? We were about to approve a $30 million contract with an American cybersecurity company when all this happened." Ryan raised his eyebrows, surprised. "And what happened to that contract?" "Cancelled," Timothy replied. "Richard decided to invest in American talent instead of importing solutions. His exact words were, 'If a girl from the Bronx can hack our system, let's find and train more minds like hers.'" Ryan shook his head, impressed by the turnaround. "Who would have thought our biggest security problem would end up becoming our greatest opportunity?" "Dear listener, If you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers out. Now continuing. After 3 intense weeks in Chicago, the time had come for the Miller family to return to New York. Margaret's condition had improved considerably, and the doctors were optimistic about the surgery scheduled for the following month. In the hospital room, Emily carefully packed a small bag with her grandmother's belongings. Margaret was being discharged temporarily that day and would stay at Harold's house until the date of the procedure. "All set, Grandma," Emily announced, zipping up the bag. "I put your favorite creams right on top so you can find them easily." Margaret watched her granddaughter with admiration. There was a maturity in that girl far beyond her 10 years. "Are you sure you have to go back to New York today, sweetheart?" the elderly woman asked, trying to hide the sadness in her voice. Emily stepped closer to the bed and held her grandmother's hands in hers. "I do, Grandma. School starts again on Monday, and Dad has that important meeting at work on Tuesday." She pointed to the tablet on the nightstand. "But remember, we'll talk every day on here, and in 2 months, when you've recovered from surgery, you'll come visit us in New York." The door to the room opened and Sarah walked in with Dr. William. "All ready for discharge?" the doctor asked, stepping closer to check Margaret's vitals one last time. "All ready, Doctor," Emily answered before her grandmother could speak, drawing smiles from the adults. "Emily's been my personal nurse," Margaret said, affectionately. "She memorized all my medication times and never lets me forget a single one." Dr. William smiled at the girl. "Maybe we have a future doctor here," he remarked while listening to Margaret's heartbeat. Emily shook her head. "No, Doctor, I want to work with computers. I'll create systems to help people like my grandma stay connected with their families, even when they're far apart." The doctor raised his eyebrows, impressed by the determination in the child's voice. "Well, whatever you choose, I'm sure you'll be excellent at it," he said, putting away his stethoscope. "Mrs. Margaret, you're cleared to go, but remember, rest, take your meds on time, and no strong emotions." "With this granddaughter," the elderly woman joked. "Impossible not to feel strong emotions, Doctor." Everyone laughed, easing the tension of the farewell. Later that day at Chicago's airport, the family gathered for their final goodbyes. Harold hugged his son tightly, while Emily and Sarah said their farewells to Margaret. "I'll be back soon, Grandma," Emily promised, hugging her grandmother gently to avoid hurting her. "And I'll call you as soon as we land in New York." "I'm going to miss you so much, my angel," replied Margaret, holding back tears. "Thank you for moving mountains to see me." Emily smiled, that radiant smile that melted hearts. "You're worth every mountain, Grandma." When the boarding announcement echoed through the speakers, the family exchanged their final hugs. Daniel helped his mother sit in the wheelchair Harold was pushing, while Emily and Sarah headed toward the gate. "Dad," Daniel called, turning back one last time. "If anything, literally anything happens, call me. I'll be on the first flight back." Harold nodded, emotion visible in his tired eyes. "I'll take good care of her, son. Go in peace." On the plane, Emily took the window seat again. As the aircraft taxied down the runway, she stared at the airport, imagining her grandparents, still waving, even though she could no longer see them. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" Sarah asked, noticing the girl's unusual silence. Emily nodded, but her eyes were glistening. "Mom, what if Grandma doesn't get better? What if we never see her again?" Sarah felt a pang in her heart. It was easy to forget that, despite all her intelligence and maturity, Emily was still a 10-year-old child with the fears and insecurities of her age. "Your grandmother is strong, Emily," she replied, wrapping an arm around her daughter's shoulders. "And now she has the best doctors and all the treatment she needs. Besides," she added with a smile, "she has you as her motivation to get better." Emily rested her head on her mother's shoulder. "You know, Mom, I don't regret what I did. I know it was wrong, but sometimes we do the wrong things for the right reasons," Sarah finished. "What matters is learning from our mistakes and trying to make things right like you did." The plane accelerated and took off, leaving Chicago behind. Emily watched through the window as the city shrank into tiny specks of light, surrounded by the vastness of the Great Lakes forests. "I'm going to make a special app for Grandma," Emily said suddenly. "One that shows all the medicine she needs to take with alarms and everything. And it'll have games to help exercise her memory. Daniel, who had overheard from the next seat, exchanged a proud glance with Sarah. "I'm sure your grandmother will love that, Emily," he said, "and maybe many other people like her could benefit from it too." "Do you think Jennifer would help me develop this at Sky America?" Emily asked, enthusiasm returning to her voice. "Why don't you ask her when we get back?" Daniel suggested. "I'm sure she'd be impressed with your idea." Emily smiled, already mentally planning the app's features. The sadness of farewell was beginning to give way to excitement for a new project that could help her grandmother and many other elderly people. 3 days after returning to New York, Emily went back to school. News of her feat, though without specific details about the security breach, had spread, and the girl found herself the center of attention. "Is it true you hacked an airline?" asked Tyler, a classmate, during recess. Emily felt her face grow warm. She didn't like being in the spotlight. "It wasn't like that," she replied, nervously playing with the ends of her hair. "I just found a mistake in their website." "And they gave you a tablet instead of arresting you?" the boy pressed, impressed. Before Emily could answer, Mrs. Gardner, the math teacher, approached the group. "Emily, could you come with me to the teacher's lounge?" she asked kindly. "There's someone who'd really like to talk to you." Curious, Emily followed the teacher through the school halls to the teacher's lounge. Inside, to her surprise, Jennifer Davis was chatting animatedly with the principal. "Emily!" exclaimed Jennifer when she saw her. "So good to see you again. How was your trip to Chicago? How's your grandmother?" "She's doing better, thank you," replied Emily timidly. "The doctor said she'll have surgery next month." "That's wonderful news," Jennifer smiled. "Well, I came here today to talk to your principal about a special project, and I think you'll be very excited to hear what it is." Emily looked curiously at the principal, who seemed unusually thrilled. "Sky America is launching an educational program called Wings of Tomorrow," Jennifer explained. "We'll be providing computer labs and coding courses at selected public schools. And guess which school was chosen first?" Emily's eyes widened. "Our school?" "Exactly," Jennifer confirmed. "And we'd like you to be our junior ambassador. What do you think?" Emily could hardly believe it. A whole computer lab with coding classes. It was more than she'd ever dreamed of. "And there's more," Jennifer continued. "Your dad told me about your idea for an app to help seniors, like your grandmother, manage medications and exercise their memory. I thought it was brilliant. How about we develop it together as the program's first official project?" Emily felt a wave of excitement rush through her. Her small mistake had sparked something much bigger than she could have imagined. "I'd love to," she exclaimed, unable to contain her enthusiasm. "When can we start?" The adults chuckled at the girl's excitement. "The lab will be ready in 2 weeks," the principal replied. "In the meantime, Mrs. Davis suggested you start sketching how you'd like the app to work." "I already did," said Emily, opening her backpack and pulling out a notebook full of notes and sketches. "Look, this is the home screen, and here's where they can set medication reminders." Jennifer watched, impressed, as Emily explained, in surprising detail, how her envisioned app would function. There was no doubt, this child had extraordinary talent that needed nurturing. At Sky America, Emily's story had sparked a quiet revolution. What began as a security crisis had turned into an opportunity for renewal and social responsibility. Daniel Miller, now officially part of the company's security team, was in a meeting with the marketing department. They were discussing how to announce the new Wings of Tomorrow program without revealing it was inspired by a security flaw discovered by a child. "The focus should be on the opportunities we're creating for young talent," argued Brittany Sanders, the marketing director. "A new generation of Americans equipped for the digital world. And that's not just marketing, it's the truth," Daniel added. "We're literally changing futures." Timothy Anderson, who was also in the meeting, smiled as he thought about how it all began. "Of all the crises we've faced, who would have guessed one of the worst would bring us one of our most promising projects?" "The difference was how we chose to respond," remarked Jennifer, who had just entered the room after returning from Emily's school. "We could have taken the obvious path, cover it up, tighten security, and move on. Instead, we decided to learn from it." As the meeting continued, Daniel got a text on his phone. It was a photo from Harold. Margaret was sitting in a rocking chair on the porch, smiling at the camera while holding the tablet Emily had set up for her. The caption read, "Your mum just finished a crossword puzzle. Says she's practicing to challenge Emily next time they meet." Daniel smiled, feeling a wave of gratitude. Just over a month ago, he was unemployed, worried about his mother's health, and with no prospects for change. Now, he had a promising job. His mother was receiving proper treatment, and his daughter was about to embark on a journey that could define her future. And it had all started with a bold act of mischief by a girl determined to see her grandmother one more time. At school, Emily returned to the classroom after her talk with Jennifer and the principal. Her classmates bombarded her with questions about what had happened, but she just smiled, saving the news for the right moment. During science class, while the teacher explained the solar system, Emily discreetly sketched new ideas for the app in her notebook. She visualized the screens, imagined the navigation flow, and thought of features that would make life easier for people like her grandmother. "Emily," called the teacher, noticing her distraction, "can you tell us which planet is closest to the sun?" "Mercury, ma'am," Emily replied promptly without hesitation. "And what is Mercury's most striking feature?" "It has the fastest and most eccentric orbit of all the planets in the solar system," Emily answered, surprising the teacher. "Very good, Emily," said the teacher, impressed. "I see you were paying attention after all." Emily smiled shyly. She didn't mention that she had read 3 books on astronomy during her last vacation, simply because she was curious about the subject. When the bell rang, signaling the end of classes, Emily packed her things into her backpack and headed to the courtyard, where Sarah was waiting for her as usual. "How was your day, sweetheart?" Sarah asked, hugging the girl. "It was amazing, Mum," Emily replied, her eyes shining with excitement. "Jennifer came to school today. They're setting up a whole computer lab here with programming courses and everything, and I'm going to be the junior ambassador for the project." Sarah smiled, sharing her daughter's enthusiasm. As they walked home, Emily recounted every detail of the meeting and her plans for the app that would help her grandmother. "And guess what else, Mom? Jennifer said if the app turns out well, they might make it available for other elderly people too. Just imagine, something I created helping so many people." Sarah watched her daughter with a mix of pride and amazement. Emily had always been a smart and curious child, but recent events had awakened a passion and determination in her that had only been latent before. "I'm so proud of you, you know," Sarah said, holding her daughter's hand as they crossed the street. "You turned a mistake into something wonderful." Emily squeezed her mother's hand, reflecting on everything that had happened. "You know, Mom, I think Grandma was right about that poem." "Which poem?" "The one by Maya Angelou that I read to her, about how what matters isn't the starting point, but the journey." Sarah smiled, once again surprised by the maturity her daughter showed. "She was absolutely right, sweetheart, and your journey is just beginning." When they got home, they found Daniel already preparing dinner. The aroma of lasagna, Emily's favorite dish, filled the apartment. "Did something special happen today?" Emily asked, smelling the delicious scent as soon as they walked in. Daniel smiled, exchanging a knowing glance with Sarah. "Actually, yes," he replied, drying his hands on his apron. "I got a call from Mercy Medical Center in Chicago today. Grandma's surgery has been moved up to next week." "Is that good or bad?" Emily asked, worry immediately crossing her face. "It's very good," Daniel reassured her. "It means she's strong enough for the procedure, and the sooner it's done, the better. And there's more. Dr. William managed to bring in a specialist from the New York Heart Institute to perform the surgery." "The best heart surgeon in the country," finished Sarah, hugging her daughter. "Your grandmother will receive the best possible treatment." Emily felt an immense relief. There was still worry, of course. Any surgery carried risks, especially for someone her grandmother's age. But knowing she'd be in the best hands possible eased her heart. "And did you know it was Sky America that organized and paid for the doctor to come to Chicago?" added Daniel, pouring juice for everyone. "It's part of a social responsibility program they're expanding." Emily smiled, feeling part of something bigger. Her little adventure had sparked a wave of positive changes that went far beyond her family. Over dinner, Emily told her father about Jennifer's visit to the school and her plans for the app. I'm thinking of calling it active memory, she said, gesturing animatedly with her fork. It'll have brain training games, medication reminders, and even a simplified video call system designed for seniors. Daniel listened carefully, impressed by the level of detail in his daughter's ideas. You know, Emily, this could really make a difference in so many people's lives, he remarked. Think of all the seniors like your grandmother who could benefit from a tool like this. That's exactly why I want to do it, Dad, Emily replied earnestly. I want to use what I know to help people. After dinner, while Sarah washed the dishes and Daniel finished some work reports, Emily sat at the living room table with her tablet, sketching new ideas for the app. Every now and then, she'd pause and glance out the window at the New York night sky, thinking of her grandmother in Chicago, thousands of miles away but somehow closer than ever. On her tablet, Emily opened the video call app to talk to Margaret, as she'd promised to do every day. "Grandma," she exclaimed as the elderly woman's smiling face appeared on the screen. "How are you today?" "I'm fine, sweetheart," Margaret replied, adjusting her glasses to see her granddaughter better. "Your grandfather told me you already heard the news about the surgery." "Yes, we're so happy the doctor scheduled it for next week. Are you nervous?" Margaret smiled, that serene smile that always calmed Emily. "A little, of course, but I'm more excited than nervous. After this surgery, I'll finally be able to visit you in New York, remember?" Emily nodded eagerly. "I'm counting the days, Grandma. I already know all the places I want to show you here." For nearly an hour, grandmother and granddaughter talked about everything, from the medications Margaret was taking to the new friends Emily had made at school. The girl explained the app she was developing, and Margaret listened with genuine interest, asking questions and offering suggestions. "You know I always wanted to be a teacher, don't you?" Margaret remarked at one point. "But back then, in rural Chicago, a girl like me barely finished middle school." "You would have been an amazing teacher, Grandma," Emily said. "Maybe, but you know what makes me happiest? Seeing you have opportunities I never had. That, to me, is worth more than any dream I didn't get to fulfill." When the call ended, Emily sat quietly for a moment, reflecting on her grandmother's words. There was so much she took for granted: her education, her access to technology, the opportunities unfolding before her. And all of it was the result of sacrifices made by people like her parents and grandparents. That night, before bed, Emily made a silent promise to herself. She would use all her talents and opportunities, not just for her own benefit, but to create a better world for people like her grandmother. The following week, while Margaret prepared for her surgery in Chicago, life in New York continued at a fast pace. At Emily's school, the installation of the new computer lab was nearly complete, featuring state-of-the-art computers, tablets, and even equipment for educational robotics. "I've never seen anything like this in a public school," remarked Mrs. Gardner, the math teacher, as she supervised the arrival of the equipment. "This will completely transform our students' learning." Emily watched everything with bright eyes, barely able to wait to start using the new resources. Along with 5 other classmates selected for the pilot program, she had been excused from regular classes that morning to observe the lab setup. "When can we start using the computers?" asked Timothy, one of the selected students, as excited as Emily. "The official opening will be next week," replied Mrs. Gardner. "But you, the project ambassadors, will get special access starting tomorrow. To familiarize yourselves with the equipment." Emily could hardly contain her excitement. Only one shadow loomed over this perfect moment: her worry about her grandmother's surgery, scheduled for the next day. That afternoon, when Emily arrived home, she found her parents in a serious conversation in the kitchen. Both seemed tense, and the girl immediately sensed something was wrong. "Did something happen to Grandma?" she asked, fear creeping into her voice. Sarah and Daniel exchanged worried glances before Daniel answered, "Sit down, Emily, we need to talk." With her heart racing, Emily obeyed, bracing herself for the worst. "Your grandmother is fine," Daniel reassured quickly, noticing the panic in his daughter's eyes. But there was a complication with the specialist coming from New York. The plane bringing him had technical issues and had to turn back. "Does that mean the surgery will be postponed?" asked Emily, slightly relieved. It wasn't something worse. "Not necessarily," Sarah replied, holding her daughter's hand. Your father managed something extraordinary. Daniel smiled faintly, a mix of pride and embarrassment on his face. Sky America is providing a private flight to take the doctor to Chicago early tomorrow morning, he explained. The surgery can still happen as planned. Emily's eyes widened in amazement. A plane just for the doctor, isn't that really expensive? It's an investment in many people's health, Daniel explained. Dr. Andrews won't just operate on your grandmother. During his 3 days in Chicago, he'll perform 5 other complex heart surgeries and give a lecture to local doctors. And there's more, Sarah added, her face lighting up with a smile. The company decided it would be important for a family representative to accompany this special project. Emily looked back and forth between them, confused. What does that mean? It means you and I are going to Chicago tomorrow on the same flight as Dr. Andrews, Daniel explained. We'll be there when your grandmother wakes up from surgery. Emily could hardly believe it. Tears of joy welled in her eyes as she hugged her parents tightly. Thank you, thank you, thank you, she repeated emotionally. I can't wait to tell Grandma. Actually, Sarah said, checking her watch, it's better we don't tell her yet. We don't want her to get anxious the night before surgery. It'll be a special surprise when she wakes up and sees you there. Emily agreed, though she could barely contain her excitement. The thought of being by her grandmother's side during such an important moment was the best gift she could imagine. That evening, during the video call with Margaret, Emily had to make a tremendous effort not to reveal the surprise. Her grandmother seemed calm, though a little nervous about the procedure the next day. I'll be thinking about you the whole time, Grandma, Emily said at the end of the call. And when you wake up, you'll feel so much better. Thank you, my angel, Margaret smiled. Just knowing you're rooting for me gives me all the strength I need. After hanging up, Emily rushed to pack her suitcase. The flight to Chicago would leave at 5 a.m., which meant they needed to be at the airport by 3:30. It would be a short night, but the girl doubted she'd sleep much anyway. Her excitement was too overwhelming. As she carefully folded her clothes, Emily reflected on how much her life had changed in the past few weeks. What had started as a desperate prank had turned into a series of events that were transforming not just her family's life, but potentially many others as well. Along with her clothes, Emily packed her tablet and the notebook, where she was developing ideas for the Active Memory app. Maybe she could show the sketches to her grandmother once she was well enough. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now back to the story. JFK International Airport was relatively quiet at that early hour. In the private terminal for executive flights, Emily and Daniel waited alongside a small Sky America crew and Dr. Frederick Andrews, a middle-aged man with a serious expression, but kind eyes. So this is the famous Emily, the doctor exclaimed when introduced to the girl. Your father told me all about you and your grandmother. Emily smiled shyly, studying the man who would literally hold her grandmother's life in his hands in just a few hours. You'll make my grandma better, right? She asked bluntly, with the honesty typical of children. Dr. Frederick smiled, crouching to her eye level. I'll do absolutely everything in my power, he promised. And from what I've seen in her tests, the odds are excellent. Your grandmother seems like a very strong woman. She's the strongest person I know, Emily agreed, comforted by the doctor's confidence. When the boarding announcement sounded, the small group made their way to the runway, where a Sky America executive jet awaited them. For Emily, who had only ever flown on commercial planes, the experience was entirely new. It's so small, she exclaimed, eyeing the jet. Are you sure it can make it all the way to Chicago? Daniel laughed, squeezing his daughter's shoulder affectionately. Absolutely. It might be smaller, but it's much faster than commercial planes. We'll get there in about 3.5 hours instead of the usual 4. Inside the aircraft, Emily was amazed by the luxury and comfort. Spacious leather seats, work tables, even a small lounge area with sofas and a TV. Wow, she exclaimed, slowly turning to take in every detail. It's like a house with wings. Jennifer Davis, who was also part of the group, smiled at the girl's wonder. Quite different from your last flight, huh? She teased, winking. Emily nodded, feeling a twinge of guilt as she remembered how she'd gotten her first tickets. Very different, she murmured. Hey, don't look so down, Jennifer said, noticing the shift in the girl's mood. We all make mistakes. What matters is what we do afterward. And you, Emily, turned yours into something amazing for so many people. The takeoff was smooth, and soon they were cutting through the still dark sky of the United States. Despite her excitement, Emily quickly felt the exhaustion of the sleepless night and dozed off in the comfortable seat. Daniel watched his sleeping daughter, her angelic face softly lit by the dim cabin lights. In her chest, a mix of gratitude and admiration. Life had given her many twists and turns lately, but perhaps the most surprising of all was discovering the extraordinary talents her daughter possessed. She's remarkable, isn't she? Jennifer commented, sitting in the seat next to Daniel and handing him a cup of coffee. Sometimes I wonder where it all comes from, Daniel confessed, accepting the coffee. Sarah and I always knew she was smart, of course, but it's something else. Some people are born with a kind of intelligence that doesn't fit conventional standards, Jennifer reflected. Most of the time, those brilliant minds end up misunderstood, or worse, wasted. Emily was lucky to have parents who recognize and support her potential. Daniel shook his head thoughtfully. I'm not sure if it was luck or if we simply had no choice, he said with a smile. Emily has always been inevitable, like a force of nature. On the other side of the aircraft, Dr. Frederick Andrews reviewed Margaret's test results on his tablet, making occasional notes. The surgery would be complex. A heart valve replacement in an elderly patient always carried significant risks. But the doctor remained confident. He had performed similar procedures hundreds of times throughout his career. Every now and then, he'd glance up and observe the sleeping girl. It was hard to believe that this angelic-looking child had sparked a technological revolution at one of the country's largest companies, and even harder to believe that, indirectly, she was making it possible for 5 other people in Chicago to receive life-saving heart surgeries. The sun was beginning to rise when the pilot announced they'd begin their descent into Chicago. Emily woke at the announcement, rubbing her sleepy eyes. Are we there yet? She asked, still disoriented. Almost, Daniel replied, helping her adjust her seat to an upright position. Look out the window, you'll be able to see the Chicago River and the meeting of the waters soon. Emily pressed her face against the oval window, marveling at the aerial view of Chicago at dawn. The city seemed to emerge from the dense forests, with the river winding majestically around it. It's beautiful, she whispered, watching the natural phenomenon of the dark waters of the Chicago River merging with the muddy waters of the Mississippi, forming the mighty Missouri. The landing was smooth, and soon they were descending the aircraft steps into the humid morning heat of the Great Lakes forests. An ambulance and an official hospital car were waiting on the tarmac. Dr. Andrews, we need to head straight to the hospital. One of the local doctors who had come to greet them informed him. Mrs. Margaret is already being prepped for surgery. The specialist nodded, quickly saying goodbye to Daniel and Emily. I'll see you in a few hours, he said before getting into the ambulance. If all goes as expected, your grandmother will be talking to you by the end of the day. As the doctor left, Harold approached to hug his son and granddaughter. What a wonderful surprise, and the elderly man exclaimed, his eyes brimming with emotion. Your mother would be so happy to know you're here. It's supposed to be a surprise, Grandpa, Emily explained. She'll see us when she wakes up from surgery. Harold smiled, running his hand affectionately through his granddaughter's hair. It'll be the best medicine she could ever receive. At the hospital, the wait felt endless. Margaret's surgery was expected to take between 4 and 6 hours, depending on any complications that might arise during the procedure. Emily tried to distract herself with a book she'd brought, but her mind kept drifting back to her grandmother, imagining what was happening in the operating room at that very moment. Daniel alternated between conversations with his father and calls to Sarah in New York, keeping her updated on the situation. I wish so much you could be here too, he said during one of the calls. Emily is being so strong, but I know she'd love to have you nearby. I wish I could be there too, Sarah replied on the other end of the line, but someone had to stay behind to handle things at Emily's school and work. Besides, she added, with a touch of humor, if we were all there, what kind of surprise would that be for Mrs. Margaret? Daniel smiled, comforted by his wife's positivity even from afar. In the waiting room, Emily noticed an elderly man who seemed particularly anxious, pacing back and forth and checking his watch every few minutes. Moved by genuine curiosity, the girl approached him. "Are you waiting for someone in surgery too?" she asked kindly. The man stopped, surprised by the child's interest, and nodded. "My wife, Dorothy," he answered, his voice trembling with emotion. "We've been married for 53 years. This is the first time we've been apart for so long." Emily sat beside him, offering silent companionship. Before long, the man, who introduced himself as Samuel, began sharing stories about his life with Dorothy. How they met at a summer festival, the 4 children they raised, the hardships and joys they shared over more than 5 decades together. "You know what's funny?" Samuel remarked after sharing a particularly touching story. "We never had the chance to travel outside of Chicago. We always dreamed of visiting Miami, seeing the Statue of Liberty, but life kept happening. The kids, the bill, and we kept putting it off." Emily listened intently, his words touching something deep in her young heart. "You can still make that dream come true," she said with conviction. "When your wife gets better, you can take that trip. It's never too late." Samuel smiled, moved by the unexpected wisdom from someone so young. "You're right, little one. And you know what? As soon as Dorothy recovers, we're finally taking that trip. I promised her before the surgery, and a man should keep his promises." The conversation was interrupted when a doctor approached, calling for family of Mrs. Dorothy. Mitchell. Samuel stood quickly, his face a mask of apprehension. "The surgery was a success," the doctor announced with a smile. "Mrs. Dorothy is being taken to recovery now." Emily watched, moved as the elderly man covered his face with his hands and wept silently, tears of pure relief and gratitude. That moment crystallized for her the true importance of medicine and caring for others. 2 more hours passed before Dr. Frederick finally appeared at the waiting room door, still in his surgical scrubs. His face, though visibly tired, carried a reassuring smile. "Mr. Miller," he called, searching for Daniel among the people. Daniel and Emily stood immediately, Harold close behind them. The 3 approached the doctor, their hearts racing with anticipation. "The surgery was completed successfully," Dr. Frederick announced. "We were able to replace the heart valve and perform the other necessary procedures. Mrs. Margaret is stable and responding well." Emily felt a wave of relief so intense her legs went weak. Daniel steadied her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "When can we see her?" Harold asked, his voice thick with emotion. "She's in the ICU now and will stay there for the next 24 to 48 hours as a precaution," the doctor explained. "But she should wake up from the anesthesia in the next few hours. Given the special circumstances, I'll authorize a brief visit as soon as she's conscious." "I believe seeing family, especially you," she added, looking at Emily, "will be a great boost for your recovery." Emily smiled, tears of happiness shining in her eyes. Her grandmother was okay. The nightmare that had begun with the news of Margaret's illness, which had driven her to take desperate measures to see her, was finally coming to a positive end. As they waited for permission to visit Margaret, Emily sat near the window in the waiting room, watching the hospital's activity. Doctors, nurses, patients, and families, all caught up in their own stories of pain, hope, fear, and healing. Suddenly, she had an idea. Grabbing her tablet, she opened her Notes app and began sketching a new concept, not just for the Active Memory app, but for something bigger, something that could connect patients in treatment with their distant families, allowing real-time updates, test results sharing, and more efficient communication between medical teams. Daniel, noticing his daughter's sudden focus, approached curiously. "What are you working on so intently?" he asked, sitting beside her. Emily looked up, that familiar spark of excitement in her eyes. "I had an idea, Dad," she replied. "An idea that could help a lot of people like Grandma and that Samuel I met today." As Emily explained her new concept, Daniel was reminded once again of his daughter's extraordinary potential, not just for understanding complex systems, but especially for seeing how technology could be used to solve real, touching problems. "You know what I love most about you, Emily," he said when she finished. It's not your intelligence or creativity, though both are impressive. It's your heart. You truly care about people." Emily smiled, a little embarrassed by the praise. "I learned from you and Mom," she replied simply, "and from Grandma too. She always says knowledge without kindness is useless." The moment was interrupted when a nurse approached, calling their names. "Mrs. Margaret is awake," she announced with a kind smile. "And Dr. Frederick has approved a quick visit. Who would like to go in first?" "Emily," Daniel answered immediately, exchanging a glance with Harold, who nodded in agreement. "She should be the first person my mother sees when she wakes up." The nurse smiled, extending her hand to Emily. "Come with me, sweetheart. I'll take you to your grandmother." Emily followed the nurse down the hall to the ICU, her heart pounding. She was eager to see her grandmother, but also a little nervous about how she would find her after surgery. "Your grandmother is still under anesthesia and has several machines connected to her," the nurse explained as they walked. "It might look scary, but it's all normal and necessary to monitor her recovery. She might be a little confused or sleepy, and that's expected too." Emily nodded, absorbing the information seriously. When they finally entered the ICU room, her eyes immediately found Margaret, lying in the hospital bed surrounded by monitors and equipment. Even with all those machines, even with the paleness and visible exhaustion on her face, her grandmother looked peaceful. "Grandma," Emily called softly, stepping closer to the bed. Margaret slowly turned her head toward the familiar voice. When her eyes met Emily's, an expression of pure surprise and joy lit up her tired face. "Emily," she whispered, her voice hoarse from intubation during surgery. "My angel, are you really here or am I dreaming?" "I'm really here, Grandma," Emily replied, carefully holding her grandmother's hand in hers. "We came to surprise." "Do me, Dad, and Dr. Michael. We came together from New York this morning." A tear escaped from the corner of Margaret's eye, sliding silently down her cheek. "You keep finding ways to travel just to see me, don't you?" the elderly woman teased, a faint but genuine smile on her pale lips. Emily laughed, relieved to see that even after such a serious surgery, her grandmother's spirit remained intact. "This time I came completely legally," she assured her, "in a private plane and everything." "Private?" Margaret repeated, raising her eyebrows slightly. "My granddaughter is getting fancy." Emily spent the next few minutes telling her grandmother about the new computer lab at school, the Wings of Tomorrow program, and her role as a junior ambassador. Mindful not to tire Margaret, she kept the conversation light and positive. "And I'm developing a special app just for you," she concluded, "to help with the medications and exercises the doctor will prescribe after surgery." Margaret gently squeezed her granddaughter's hand, her eyes shining with pride. "Emily, my love, you are the greatest blessing in my life," she said emotionally. "Seeing you grow like this, using your intelligence to do good, there's no greater gift for me." The nurse approached gently, signaling that visiting hours were coming to an end. "You need to rest now, Mrs. Gardner," she explained, "and your granddaughter can come back later." Emily leaned in to kiss her grandmother's forehead. "Rest, Grandma. We'll be here when you wake up." As she left the ICU, Emily found Daniel and Harold waiting anxiously for news. Her bright smile was all they needed to see to know the visit had gone well. "She's okay," Emily confirmed. "Tired, but still. The same grandma we know." The three hugged, sharing their relief and gratitude for the successful surgery. In that moment, Emily felt a deep certainty. No matter where life took her, no matter what technologies she developed or challenges she faced, what truly gave everything meaning was human connection, love and care for those around her. The young computer genius who had discovered how to travel without spending a dime had finally learned the most valuable lesson of all. Some journeys aren't measured in miles traveled, but in hearts touched along the way. 3 weeks after the successful surgery, Margaret was discharged from the hospital. Though she still needed care and regular medical follow-ups, her recovery was progressing surprisingly well. The doctors credited part of her rapid recovery to her high spirits and determination to get better quickly. "You're an example of resilience, Mrs. Gardner," Dr. William Brooks remarked during her follow-up appointment. "I rarely see patients Your age recovering so well and so quickly from such a major surgery." Seated beside her grandmother in the office, Emily smiled proudly. During the 3 weeks of hospital recovery, she had stayed in Chicago with her father, taking turns caring for Margaret while Daniel worked remotely. Sarah had joined them in the last week, completing the family reunion. "It's the power of love, Doctor," Margaret replied simply. "Having my family close gives me all the strength I need." As they left the hospital, Emily held her grandmother's arm firmly, helping her walk to the car where Harold and Sarah were waiting. "Take it slow, Grandma," she cautioned. "The doctor said you still need to be careful." Margaret smiled at her granddaughter, touched by her concern. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Better than I've been in a long time." In the car, the family discussed their plans for the coming weeks. The medical team had recommended that Margaret stay in Chicago for at least another month before considering a longer trip to New York. "We could rent a bigger apartment near the hospital," suggested Daniel. "That way we can all stay together during this time." "Don't be silly, son," Margaret replied. "Our house has enough room for all of you. Besides, I'm already tired of hospitals and sterile environments. I want the comfort of my own home. And I can keep studying remotely," added Emily, who had been temporarily enrolled in a local school but also received assignments from her school in New York. "The principal said it's fine as long as I do the work and email it in." Sarah exchanged a meaningful glance with Daniel. The decision to stay in Chicago longer meant professional sacrifices for both of them, but Margaret's health and the family's well-being were unquestionable priorities. "All right, we'll stay," Daniel finally agreed. "I can keep working remotely and Sarah can split her time between Chicago and New York as needed." Margaret squeezed her son's hand, grateful to have him close. It was hard to put into words how much it meant to her to be surrounded by her family at this critical moment in her life. "When all this is over, I want to really explore New York," she said, gazing out the window as the car drove through the familiar streets of Chicago. "Emily promised to show me Central Park and that art museum she's always talking about." "The Metropolitan Museum of Art," Emily corrected with a smile. "The Met. You'll love it, Grandma. It has paintings by famous artists from all over the world." As the family talked about future plans, Emily discreetly watched her grandmother. It seemed impossible that just a month ago they had been living a nightmare of uncertainty. Now, though the road to full recovery was still long, there was a clarity and hope that hadn't been there before. That same evening, after a simple dinner prepared by Sarah, Emily retreated to her father's old room, which had been set up for her during their stay in Chicago. Sitting at the small desk, she worked on her tablet, fine-tuning details of the Active Memory app. Daniel gently knocked on the slightly open door. "Can I come in?" he asked. "Of course, Dad," Emily replied, setting the tablet down on the table. "I was just finishing some adjustments to the app." Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, watching his daughter with a mix of pride and admiration. "You know, Emily, I've been thinking a lot these past few weeks," he began, "about how this all started and where we are now." Emily lowered, her eyes, a shadow of guilt crossing her face. "I know what I did was wrong, Dad. I shouldn't have." "It's not about that," Daniel gently interrupted. "We've moved past that, and you've learned your lesson. What I mean is that sometimes the mistakes we make can lead us to unexpected, even positive places." Emily tilted her head, curious about where her father was going with this. "I got an offer today," he continued. "Sky America is expanding the Wings of Tomorrow program to other regions in the United States, including Chicago. They want me to lead the implementation here in the Midwest." Emily's eyes widened in surprise. "Does that mean—" "It means we'd have to consider the possibility of moving here at least for a while," Daniel explained. "Or maybe splitting our time between New York and Chicago. We're still weighing the options." Emily was silent for a moment, processing the information. The idea of being closer to her grandmother was wonderful, but it also meant leaving. Her school, the new computer lab, her friends. "What do you think?" Daniel asked, seeing his daughter deep in thought. "Your opinion matters a lot in this decision." Emily looked out the window at the starry sky of Chicago that was becoming familiar. I think it would be good for Grandma, she finally replied. And maybe I could help kids here with coding like we're starting to do in New York. Daniel smiled, proud of the maturity his daughter showed in considering the matter. What about your friends in New York? Your school? Wouldn't you miss them? Of course I would, Emily admitted. But we could visit them, right? And there's internet everywhere. I can still talk to them. You know, one of the most special things about you, Emily, is your ability to adapt, said Daniel. You face changes with a courage many adults don't have. Emily smiled, reflecting on how drastically her life had changed in recent months. Dad, remember when all this started? When I just wanted to see Grandma? Daniel nodded, recalling the days of anguish when they discovered what Emily had done. How could I forget? I never imagined that would lead to so much, she continued. A new job for you, the program at school, now maybe moving to Chicago. It's like one little push caused a giant domino effect. That's how life works sometimes, Daniel mused. Small actions can have huge consequences for better or worse. What matters is how we respond to them. Emily stood up and hugged her father, feeling safe and loved. Dad, if we decide to come to Chicago, I think everything will work out, she said. We can do good things here too. Daniel hugged his daughter back, once again impressed by her wisdom beyond her years. Let's talk to your mom and see what she thinks, okay? This is a decision we need to make together as a family. After Daniel left, Emily returned to her tablet, but instead of working on the app, she opened a new document and began writing a list titled Good Things We Can Do in Chicago. As ideas flowed, from helping her grandmother fully recover to creating a tech education program for local children, Emily realized that no matter where she was, what truly mattered was the positive impact she could make. That girl who once figured out how to travel without spending money was now embarking on a far more meaningful journey, discovering how to use her talents to transform lives, starting with the people she loved most. The next morning during family breakfast, Daniel and Sarah announced they would seriously consider temporarily moving to Chicago. Margaret's reaction was pure joy. Having you nearby would be the best medicine I could receive, she said, her eyes brimming. We still have many details to work out, Sarah considered. My job, Emily's school. But where there's a will, there's a way. Harold, who had remained silent until then, finally spoke. Whatever you decide, know this will always be your home. Having the family together again, his voice broke with emotion. It's all we've ever dreamed of. Emily watched the scene with a full heart. The adventures that began with her surprising discovery continued unfolding in ways she could never have imagined. Wherever the future took her, she would carry the lessons learned about courage, about ethics, about family, and most importantly, about how small actions can trigger big transformations. 1 month later, with Margaret recovering more each day, Sky America officially launched the Wings of Tomorrow program in Chicago. In a lab set up at Lincoln High School, 20 children, including Emily, participated in the first coding class. On the lab wall, a discreet plaque honored all the young talents who, with creativity and boldness, challenge us to be better. It was a subtle acknowledgement of the girl who, in her quest to be close to her sick grandmother, ended up changing far more lives than she could have imagined. While Emily helped other children take their first steps into the world of programming, her app Active Memory was being tested not only by Margaret, but by 10 other elderly patients at Mercy Medical Center, all with similar stories and needs. And in a small apartment in Miami, Samuel and Dorothy finally fulfilled a lifelong dream, gazing in awe at the view of the city from the Empire State Building. The successful surgery and the words of a wise young girl had reminded the elderly couple that it's never too late to chase dreams. And so, the story of the girl who discovered how to travel without spending a dime became much more than just her clever tech trick. It turned into a powerful reminder that when motivated by love and guided by ethical principles, even our mistakes can open doors to a world of unexpected possibilities. The end. Now, dear listener, what would you do to be close to someone you love? Leave your comment, subscribe to the channel, and share this story of love and triumph. Your opinion means the world to us as we continue bringing you stories that touch the heart and inspire the soul.